I applaud you all for sticking with it, not only just in general, but sticking with your education. You know, you are all here with no other intention but to learn something. And I can't stress how important that is. I mean, it puts a little pressure on me so that I can actually teach you something, but I'm confident that you'll at least get one gem out of all of this. But no, honestly, you all deserve a round of applause for sticking with this, for dedicating your time, for, you know, spending the time here with me, with the ISA, on all of our events, with these Connect class lectures that we do, when you could be doing something else. And so it's great, you know. I really am not only appreciative, but I mean, and I don't mean this in any way condescendingly, but I'm proud that you're all doing this. Not that you need my pride, but you know what I mean. How to develop a TV series. You know, this is such a huge question and topic that I'm probably going to be hitting a lot of surface level stuff. You know, the finite details of developing a TV show can get down to, you know, the specifics of the difference between a character-oriented scene or a plot-oriented scene, or, you know, the percentage of how much plot is in the scene versus how much character development and emotional stuff. I'm not going to get into all that because, you know, I go through this process of teaching by way of the 4 levels of development and evaluation: concept, character, structure, and page work. Now I'm going down these levels because it's a little bit of a, I guess you could say, a triangle or something, with concept at the top, then character, then structure, then page work. And the reason I list them in that way from top to bottom is because we should be thinking of our concept first. Work on our concept, get our concept figured out. What is it? What's the hook? What's the general situation? Is it unique? Is it derivative of other stories? Have people seen this before? You know, you need to be asking these questions to make sure that this is worthwhile, that you're not going to be wasting your time. You're not going to spend 6, 8, 12 months working on a project that has already been done, or you're not that inspired by it, or it's just not that unique, or, you know, you only have so many projects that you're going to be able to write in your entire lifetime. So you have to make sure that this is the one that you really want to work on. So concept down to character development. Obviously, character and concept are connected. You really can't have a concept without character. Structure is a little different because, you know, then you place the concept and character within the structure. We're going to be hitting those 3 levels, not going to be talking about page work. If you have questions about formatting and stuff, I may not get to them, and I apologize, but we're going to be talking a little bit more about that upper level, surface level stuff, where it comes to just figuring out, what do I do? How do I approach writing a TV series? So the big thing to consider, again, I'm starting kind of bird's eye view here, is that, you know, when you compare writing a feature, a movie, versus a TV series, the primary difference between the two is that for a movie, you have this, the character is flawed in order to allow for a journey that puts the character into situations that will correct the flaw, or at least affect the flaw. The disclaimer there is that in a feature, you don't need your character to be, you know, 180 degrees different than he or she was from the beginning. Nonetheless, I'll say that again. A movie, the character is flawed in order to allow for a journey that puts the character into situations that will correct the flaw. So the point of a feature is for a character to evolve. Now, for a TV series, yes, oftentimes, this is the problem with TV, oftentimes, but not all the time, the point of a TV series is for a character to evolve. So I'm not saying that your character won't evolve in a TV series, but the primary difference here is that for TV, the character is flawed in order to allow an ongoing set of circumstances, a journey, to be made more interesting and engaging and dramatic. So the point of a TV series is for the situation to evolve while the character is living within it. Yes, the character is affected and changes a little bit and evolves. But if you look at like a Breaking Bad, Walt changed over a very, very long period of time. He broke bad. I mean, it's the whole point of the title. And it was a process of watching this character just continually breaking bad. But the point of the show was, yes, character evolution, but it was the broader scope of the situation that character is set in. That's really the reason we watch TV. We get to spend a much longer period of time with our characters to see their layers. And I'm saying characters plural because very rarely, if ever, are we going to see a TV series with one character? That would be kind of amazing if you could engage the audience in a really fun, entertaining way. If you have a TV series over multiple episodes and seasons with only one character, I don't know if that's possible, but nonetheless, you have multiple characters who are experiencing not only an overall situation, which we could call the A story or the plot A situation, but they're all also experiencing their own individual emotional and character-oriented situations. So that word situation is really important because it's another word for dilemma or, problem, conflict, but situation naturally comes with this level of definition that, you know what you have just naturally. If someone is in a situation and there's likely a problem in it, so the character has to get out of the situation. So the goal within just a tiny little situation is that, oh my God, I have a problem, I have to solve the problem and get out of it. That's really the general breakdown for any story, right? I mean, whether it's a feature or TV series, you have a character with a goal and they're now within a situation they have to navigate in order to achieve the goal. If you can remember that, you're fine. The hard part is figuring out what type of flaws and issues and layers and problems, and like Jen Grisanti uses, wound, that then, well, and this is another Jen Grisanti term, triggers the response of the character within the situation. So this is a difficult topic. I have all these notes because there's just so much to cover, because there are so many different layers, but there should be emphasis on concept. What do I have here in terms of uniqueness? And then how does the character provide the uniqueness? How does this overall situation conceptually evolve because of a character I'm putting in it? And Jen is brilliant. She's wonderful. If you can work with Jen, she focuses primarily, if not only, on TV. And she's wonderful. She's a wonderful human being, but she's been doing this longer than I have. So that's the primary difference. In TV, the character is flawed in order to allow an ongoing set of circumstances to be made more interesting. And the point of TV is for the situation to evolve. You have this ongoing situation. I'll use as an example, with Stranger Things. I'm going to use it even though it's a little outdated. We've probably all seen it, or at least we understand what it is. It's a monster story, right? Kid gets kidnapped by something. We don't know what it is. His friends go and try to find him. I mean, that's ultimately the whole thing. What makes it interesting is the type of monster, who created the monster, the fact that Will, the kid that was kidnapped, slowly starts communicating from this other realm. Like, that's weird. You're layering in conceptual stuff, but what makes the show engaging is the layered personal storylines of these characters. So they're and this is the most important thing to remember in TV series. Characters with their own personal situations outside of the plot are dealing with and pursuing a goal within the plot. So if you have a plot of monster kidnapped kid, we have to go find him, that in and of itself is a big deal. It's obviously problematic. But then you also have a young woman who's growing up, has her first crush, falls in love for the first time. You have 3 friends who are navigating being kind of geeky and nerdy in high school or middle school. And then, of course, we introduce 11, and one of the kids falls in love with her for the first time. But the crazy thing is, she's like a superhero, So there are all these things that really don't necessarily have anything to do specifically with the plot. They are all character-driven stuff, but they become a part of the plot because they're just naturally involved, right? And so I'm kind of dumbing it down just to try to make a point. I mean, the hard part about TV is that every show is different, and formula is much more difficult to pinpoint in TV. Besides the beats, at the end of the first act for an hour long, you're going to have the goal is stated. They're going to go off and try to figure it out. At the end of the second act, you're going to have a twist toward the pursuit of their goal. Things are made more difficult. At the end of the third act, and so on and so forth, right? There are things that should happen at certain times. But Every show's different because of theme, because of tone, because of network. You know, if it's an hour long on CBS, it's going to be much different than an hour long on HBO. If you have a half-hour comedy on Hulu, it's going to be much different in terms of structure and makeup and when the act breaks occur than compared to, you know, Big Bang Theory. So you have much more studying to do when it comes to TV. When you watch a movie, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours long. You've got 3 acts, and it's much more formulaic, and it's character driven. It's usually 1 or 2 primary characters, and it's simpler. And you would think that a movie would be focusing more on character development. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. It is, of course it is. But for TV, you technically have more work to do on your characters, because you're going to be spending so much more time with them, and you have to be able to sell this show to people. My chair squeaks like crazy, so I apologize if you hear the squeaking. But you have to be able to sell this show to a showrunner, a producer, a network, and that network, whoever's putting the money up, has to feel confident that this show can last not just multiple episodes, but multiple seasons. Let's just take the idea of limited series out of the equation right now. We'll just focus on developing TV for the long term, right? 3, 4, 5 seasons or more if you're lucky, you know. But you have more work to do when it comes to the character development, because you have to see the long term for each of your characters' storylines. And I mean literally just their personal story. Who's in love with who, what kind of drama is happening at the school between the principal and a kid. You know, it feels like it's plot because it's a part of the series, but it's helpful for you when you're developing it to try to just, if the right word is bifurcate, but, you know, divide the 2 portions of development. Here's the plot. We've got a kid that's been kidnapped. Who did it? What did it? It's this monster. And you do all the development on just the plot conceptual stuff. We've got a monster. Why does the monster exist? Where does it exist? What does it want? Why does it want it? Who created it? You know, then you go into the descriptions of all those. You know, it's kind of like, this is all important, but it isn't really character oriented stuff. It's all just big situational concept plot. Then you go over the kids in Stranger Things. All right, who are these kids? What do they want? What are their problems? What are their flaws? Why can't they have what they want? Without anything to do with the monster. Granted, you have Winona Ryder's character, who is the mother of Will, and then the brother of Will, which I can't remember his name. But, you know, they have natural connection because it's their kid. But they also have these other layers of personal issues. They're not very wealthy. They're kind of outcast in their community. Winona Ryder has issues, you know, personally in terms of, you know, I shouldn't say mental issues. That sounds horrible, but, you know, there are other things going on with them. Then suddenly you put in the fact that this kid's been kidnapped, and it makes those things, personal things, worse, or at least more difficult, more challenging, more stakes driven. So that's the first thing you need to be considering when you're developing a show, the connection between concept and character. What do I have in plot? What do I have in character? Then when you're starting to write this out, and I got the permission from one of my story farm writers to be able to use his show that he's just beginning the development process of as an example, and we'll hit that in a second. Let me just make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah. So once you figure out, okay, and this is without any type of formatting, you know, it's not, don't worry about getting to the pages. Don't worry about outlining yet. You're still just kind of figuring out and doing brainstorming and making lists for all your characters in the plot, and then starting to kind of see, ooh, like if they have this goal and they're trying to do this personally, but then this plot situation is occurring, how does that affect their goal? What might they do to correct the plot goal, which then makes their personal goal difficult? You know, you're getting into this layered process of brainstorming, which has no need for formatting. It's just open up a Word document, just start writing stuff out. You know, it's just sheer brainstorming. That's what's called breaking story. How does this connect? The structure comes much, much later. You have to understand what these character storylines are. Now, the difficulty with all of this is that when you're looking at character, you know, you're going to have a main character, a secondary character, which I call it. Some consultants call it the reflection character, or, you know, the dynamic character, or whatever. It's the second lead. In Stranger Things, you know, it's arguable that I can't remember the actor's name now, but the character that ends up kind of falling in love with 11, he's sort of the leader of the group, if you will. He is arguably well, Will is the one who was kidnapped, Shooty, but his best friend. And anyway, there's one character among the group of the boys that's a little bit more of the lead. Nonetheless, you want to be looking at, okay, who's the main character, who's the secondary character, who's the opponent? And this is where it gets kind of brain twisting. You have to be looking at each of your characters. Let's say you have 4 characters, one of which is a little bit Mike Wheeler. Thank you, Molly. One of the characters is a little bit more of the lead. Now that character is going to have his or her own secondary and his or her own opponent. But from a personal standpoint, they're also going to have a plot-oriented opponent, right? Like all the boys have the same opponent, the monster. Eventually, the weird scientist guy. I think I named him. Yeah, the Agent 1, where he's called Papa by 11 in Stranger Things. Those are all, that's like upper level opponent. They're like villain, if you will, if you want to try to differentiate the terms. But they also have opponents in their own personal lives. And you have to define who those opponents are, because those characters are going to be attempting to overcome those opponents while also trying to overcome this major, villain or opponent. And really, in a way, you could argue that most, if not all, shows are that way, whether it's fantasy like Stranger Things or Game of Thrones, or it's something really specific like Big Little Lies, or, there are opponents everywhere there. But there's also kind of an overarching thematic opponent with some of those broader HBO shows. But I shouldn't say broad, but thematic. So you have to be, this is going back to the brain twisting idea, is that you have to do the work for each of these characters, even if some of the minor characters aren't going to be on screen very often. You have to know, here's what their personal goal is, here's who their secondary might be, and it may be one of the other, 3 main characters. But then you have to define, what does that secondary character do for this one particular main character? So to summarize, you're going to have, and this is why TV is difficult, and it's why they have rooms of writers trying to write these episodes. You have so much to think about. But you have, for character 1, this person has that storyline with this secondary character, with this personal opponent, and maybe 2 secondaries, maybe 2 opponents, whatever. And then character 2, the same thing, but they have individual goals and personal issues that they're trying to figure out. And then character 3, you have to figure out who the side characters are for that 3rd character. It's a lot of work, but you have to figure out what those storylines are, who are those characters. And it's just list making, brainstorming. Don't worry about structure. Don't worry about when things happen. It's basically character, what's the word? Describing. That's not what I'm trying to say. Sketching, character sketching. You're doing character sketches. But with character sketch, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent. It's good to have backstory. It's good to understand why they are the way they are, what happened to them in the past. But that's so that you can then place them into current, present day, if you will. And then allow that character to live. They are then reacting to situations and certain scenes and moments because of the things that happen. Don't worry about trying to give us flashbacks. Don't bring us back. You don't always have to do that. Flashbacks in TV they are a little bit more plot oriented. You're trying to give the audience the information here. And maybe we'll learn some personal things, but it's going to be new information. It's going to be engaging. I'm a proponent of not using flashbacks, really forcing us and challenging us as writers to stay in the moment. What kind of information can we give here and now that we as audience members can participate in? We can assume things. We can guess that this is what's happening. You don't need to tell us things. TV audience members are, we are all TV audience members. We're extremely well-versed in story at this point because we're watching shows all the time. So we want to participate in it. Like WandaVision, I think, is a great example. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but it's on Disney Plus. It's in the Marvel Universe. I know very little about the Marvel Universe, almost nothing. Not because I don't like it. I just didn't really spend the time to watch the Marvel movies. They're a lot of fun. I love them, etc. But WandaVision is a good example of us participating in the show almost a little too much, because after a while, like 4 episodes in, I'm like, what the hell is going on? I have no idea what's happening. but there's a mystery to that, and it allows us as audience members to assume things. We're participating in the story. When TV shows don't work, or scripts or pilots don't work, is when we're trying to feed information to the audience, making sure that they know this stuff. You're better off leaving them clueless, because it's going to make you seem like you're a really smart writer. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's kind of a cheat. Like, allow the reader to go, huh, what's going on here? Why did they do that? Obviously, if the reader's doing that 3 or 4 times in one read, then we may not be giving them enough. But nonetheless, we want the audience to be participating in things. I'm going off still on that tangent about flashbacks, but it's also related to this idea of the storylines for the personal characters, or I should say personal storylines for our characters. What are they dealing with personally outside of the plot? Figure all that out, and then look at it from point A to point Z. How does it stretch out? What happens in certain spots? And don't worry about what episode or anything, but this happens, then this happens, until this twist occurs, until that twist occurs. After a while, you start to see how these stories unfold, all the while knowing you have a situation that you're going to be putting these characters in. And then they're still going to be dealing with these personal issues. So Stranger Things is a good example when you're looking at how those storylines take off and then propel the show from a personal standpoint, much less matched with a pretty high concept plot. I always use this example, but it's an old show on Fox called Sleepy Hollow. The first season was great. The later seasons were terrible, but audience members are going to tune in to a TV show because the concept seems cool. They're interested in the plot. They just have the basic idea of, Ichabod Crane from The Legend of Sleepy Hollow in present day New York, trying to fight demons. That's why I tuned in. I'm like, that's kind of cool. I kept watching because of the relationship between Abigail and Ichabod, and then the other relationships that, the character storylines that were going on, what was going on with Abby and her sister. And, you start going, that's interesting. All the while, it's like, whatever, who's the new monster this week? Like, okay, that's kind of cool and cheesy and whatever, but it's fun. But we're tuning in, and we're continuing to tune in because we're so invested in who these people are. I mean, look at Game of Thrones. After a while, I think I can maybe remember 4 names of these characters. It's another little rule. Most readers of a screenplay will maybe be able to actually remember 4 or 5 names, like literal character names. Beyond that, they just start, they can't remember them all. Game of Thrones is a perfect example. I watched every episode multiple times of all, what I think is like 8 seasons. I still can't remember all those names. But I was so interested in those character storylines, the zombies and the dragons, that just added to the cool factor. But Game of Thrones was really just a soap opera. It's all it was. X-Files, classic monster of the week combined with the overarching conspiracy storyline. So there's definitely the conspiracy storyline for sure. But you really felt for Mulder because you're constantly, well, I shouldn't say constantly, but every once in a while reminded that he lost his sister to what he thinks is aliens. And then Scully, who is a skeptic, but then she has her own personal things going on. You're always wondering if Mulder and Scully are going to come together. We're watching this because we're connecting with the characters. So, I'm still up in concept and character stuff here. I haven't even touched structure. And too often as writers, we think we have an idea. Cool, let's put it into a formula. This happens in act 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And now it's working. It's not that easy. You really have to spend the time breaking out who these characters are, what do they want, what are their goals on a personal level, what's the primary plot goal, how does it become challenging, how are the stakes rising because of the combination of the two, the plot oriented goal and the character personal goal. Some shows, and this is why TV is difficult, and it's why it's difficult to teach people about it, some shows don't really have that big high concept plot. A lot of them don't. Breaking Bad was arguably high concept plot, even though it wasn't fantasy or anything. But what is that show? I think it was like Little Fires Everywhere or something. I might be getting the title wrong, but low concept plot, but it's all character driven. Like Desperate Housewives is a good example. It's almost entirely character driven, but with the drama of the neighborhood and the basically, again, it's soap opera. Low concept plot. It's totally fine if you have low concept plot. That just means you need those characters to have really defined goals and a level of stakes with those goals that feel big. Otherwise, it's just, you're not going to really be touching on the importance of the show, right? We have a whole bunch of comments here. Let me just see what we have. I have 84 basic scripts written for a series and needed this. Things are running too smoothly for the characters. I know their flaws, but have not brought them in much. Yeah. So Lawrence, or wait a minute, Catherine. Good for you, Catherine. I mean, on a huge level, good for you for writing that many scripts. How do I say this? You don't need to write all 84. I don't mean to come down on you like that. You really just need to write the pilot with a very, a detailed Bible, and I'll talk about what a Bible can include. But it's great that you're trying to break out, all of these episodes. But you may be doing more work than you needed. I think you could, use those episode scripts that you've written as ways to, nicely define here are what can happen going forward. And this is all for the purpose of pitching the project. But you really just need the pilot and then a solid Bible with some details. And I'll show you guys what, a Bible can look like. But let me see what else we have here. I feel like so many shows use flashbacks. They do. This Is Us is kind of predicated on, it's basically a giant flashback. Queen's Gambit is a little bit of a flash forward at times, but it's also because we're in the past. They start with a so-called flashback, but it's not a flashback to us necessarily. We do bounce back a little bit, but we're kind of following the trajectory of her career. Million Little Things, also somewhat of a This Is Us, setup. Better Call Saul. There are caveats to all of this. But Jamie's asking, is he really recommending not using flashbacks, or did I hear that wrong? I am recommending not using them unless the show needs them. Like This Is Us, Million Little Things. The whole series concept is based on looking back at someone's life. Then, of course, so I'm not saying 100% you're wrong if you use flashbacks. Of course, use them if you need to. Most of the time, flashbacks are used in a way where it's just giving us information, like exposition. And that's when we, as an audience member, we just kind of lose out on the importance of it. If we can give little pieces of information, it's really engaging. It's this new twist that continues the story along. Then flashbacks can be really fun. There we go. Olga just said what I said. Is it possible to work in international markets as work in other countries can sometimes feel more progressive? Ooh, it's a big question, Holly. Let me get to that in a second. Let's see. Co-producer who's investor said at a meeting yesterday that we only need to give his one, the script, and two, the series Bible, so he can start reaching out to his casting, showrunner, investor contacts. We were very surprised that he didn't need more. Yeah. So there's a lot of questions. We're already running a little tight on time. As I told you, this is a big topic, but let me just touch on Holly's question here. Is it possible to work in international markets? Absolutely. Work in other countries can sometimes feel more progressive. It is tricky. An American TV show. I'm trying to think of an example. This Is Us. I don't know. I'm curious how if and how that works in international markets, and then vice versa. There are different. Well, let me say this. It's one reason why thrillers, action movies, and horror movies work well in total internationally, in the Americas and elsewhere, because there isn't as much of a defined cultural reference. They're all like Stranger Things. That's one of the reasons why it does so well. I mean, there is a cultural reference big time in terms of the 80s nostalgia, but you still have the monster. You have the conspiracy, you have the mystery of what the monster is. It's science fiction. So it's definitely possible. It's relative, Holly, to the project you're conceptualizing. Period dramas do well universally. They do sometimes, like Civil War dramas, like an American Civil War drama. Are people in Germany really going to be all that concerned with an American Civil War drama? So there are things to consider there. Let me hit a couple things. So in terms of pitching, we're talking about Bibles a little bit. One of my writers presented this to me yesterday, and we kind of talked about this. Now, before I post this, we're going on the honor system, and I trust everyone, and so does my writer, that no one's going to steal this idea. It's rare that ideas are stolen, but he's putting his project out there. And so I just, we trust everybody for not actually going and running away with this idea. I'm going to put the log line in the comment box. I'll read it out loud though. So this is his conceptual series log line. A local Catholic priest and Muslim imam, in cooperation with sympathetic individuals in law enforcement, the US military, and local politics, seek to restore peace and ease political divisions when violence inspired by extremist groups and expanded by the clandestine operations of the US military erupts and escalates in their community. So what I wanted to bring up to all of you, but also to reiterate what I was chatting with my writer about yesterday, we want to consider how a reader's brain is working when reading a log line and or a synopsis. But the reader's brain naturally goes through this rundown of what I was talking about before: concept, character, structure, bouncing from one, to the other without really thinking about it. But what it means on a literal and practical level, in terms of what I'm trying to talk about here, is that a reader wants to be shown, A, what makes this project unique, and B, what am I seeing? Literally, what am I going to see? Those two primary, and more often than not, unconscious thoughts are constantly flowing through a reader's brain. They may not be realizing that they're thinking out loud those questions, but we want to hit those two primary elements as quickly and early as possible, not only in our pitches and log lines, but when we're developing our project. We want to be asking, what makes this project unique? What are the people watching this going to see? It's really basic questions. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because that then brings our development to, okay, cool, character within a situation. Now, I am prefacing my notes on that log line with that, because, it's not to say that log line doesn't have these things that I'm talking about. But, we want to consider the simplicity of it. Is it simple when we read that? Do we understand that this is a high school science teacher who's dying of cancer, wants to provide for his family, and he's going to do that by making meth? Is that idea as simple as a Breaking Bad from a conceptual standpoint? They're very different projects, obviously, but from a pitch standpoint, does a reader see it as well as they would when considering this overall situation with a character, like I was saying for Breaking Bad? So, you see a particular character doing something until the situation becomes bigger and more complicated, right? That's the reference to Breaking Bad. So with this one, the log line I just posted, we have a really interesting overall, but it may be, in terms of the log line, it may be trying to be bigger than it needs to be. The two most unique elements of what is in there, you have to kind of pull them out a little bit. Priest and imam team up, but then there's also a reference at the very end of the log line, escalates in their community. So the word community to me tells me kind of maybe a small town. And then you have two people who are, religious leaders in their community, and they're going to come together to stop the conflict that's going on. So we have the two characters, and within a small town, which is kind of, setting, location, arena. And then of course the natural problem that's involved there. So I just want to go through my notes, make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, I'm saying the situation itself is not yet as unique as it could be because of the focus in the log line on all of this sympathetic individuals in law enforcement, US military, local politics, seek to restore peace, ease political divisions. Yes, we're going to see some of that, but how is that happening? And when we're developing our projects, we consider plot, and then we have characters, and yes, there's a goal, but it's the how they are going to achieve the goal that is the most important thing, because that's the reference to that question of what am I seeing? That's the primary point. I mean, I could go into a lot more notes in terms of what was written there, but let me see some comments here. So Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's socially relevant to say the least, that project. But drilling down to these two characters, what are their, personal stories? And then how are those personal stories affected by this overall plot problem, which you can get more specific about? Meaning, is there an extremist group leader? And does that person come in and do one thing that then launches the division? You can get a little bit more specific in terms of the brainstorming for the moment, because that moment is going to be repeated. So another little thing, if there's anything you take out of this webinar, is that we want to be defining early on in our development process, what is this recurring moment that we're going to be seeing every episode? In Sleepy Hollow, it was Monster of the Week. We've got Ichabod Crane teaming up with this police officer, and they're trying to, kill demons. It's that type of moment we're going to see every episode. In Breaking Bad, we have a high school science teacher knowing he's going to die, and he's starting a meth lab. And we're going to see that type of moment every single episode. Do we get the sense of that in this log line? Kind of, but we don't have the how. How are they going to pursue correcting this problem? I could go into that a lot more, but anyway, I hope that's somewhat educational there. Yeah, what's the payoff of the log line? And I think the payoff can be assumed. We don't necessarily need, because it's a series, overall series log line. But the payoff can be assumed by way of how these characters are going to pursue their goal. Okay, let me see here. I want to talk about Bibles a little bit. So I'll try to hit the basics really quick. We have a little bit, we still have time left. Like we were saying before, when you're developing a series, you just need to write the pilot, hopefully really well. The pilot, if you're writing hour-long TV, half-hour TV. And then you need a pitch Bible. There's a difference between a true show Bible and a pitch Bible. A true show Bible is really, it's created by the showrunner when the project is going up and running. You guys don't have to do that right now. But a true show Bible is like 40, 50, 60 pages. It's epic. It's got every detail for all the characters, all the storylines. You're getting into the not minutia in a bad way, but the really specific details of the entire series, every episode. Here's what's going to happen when, all of that stuff. That's a true show Bible. A pitch Bible, it's going to be 9, 10, 11 pages, maybe. And you're going to be hitting the primary elements of what your show is, plus graphically designed so it looks nice and you're setting tone. This is what it looks professional, right? You're going to be hitting, all three of the log lines: series log line, first season log line, and the pilot log line. You want those on one page, and then you're going to have a one-page synopsis of the pilot. You're going to be then getting into character descriptions, short bios, a paragraph of each primary character. And then you're going to be hitting descriptions of the first, episodes within the first season. And then you could have a summary of season 2, a short summary of season 3, short summary of season 4, just to give the broad scope, because so many things, let's say your show's picked up, a showrunner is going to come on board and they're going to do it the way they want to do it. They're going to follow the trajectory of the concept and what you've laid out. But ultimately, what a pitch Bible is doing is pitching your project so that someone looking at this, producer, agent, manager, hopefully a showrunner, can see in general, this is what the show has in terms of potential. It's interesting. It's got thematic statements. You can probably have a separate page on that. If you're personally connected to the material, like one of my writers is a volunteer paramedic, and the organization is called TIP. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but I think it's TIP. Yeah. And she's creating a 1 hour long series about these volunteers. So it's kind of like 911, but much more personal and not as procedural. Nonetheless, she is a emergency volunteer. So in her pitch Bible, she's dedicating a page to, here's how I'm connected to the material. So pitch Bibles, they're relatively formulaic, but again, it's relative to the project. If you have a connection to it, then, how are you connected to it? Now, for hour-long TV, half-hour TV, again, you don't need all the episodes written out. You do need episode descriptions in the Bible so that people understand here's what's going to happen, here's the flow of it. In animated TV, not adult animation like a Simpsons or Bob's Burgers, but for kids TV, there's preschool, there's bridge, and then there's there's another age range that's 6 to 8, I think 6 to 11 maybe, and then there's age range of 11 to 14. Those shows, and this could be really exciting for some of you. You don't need to write the pilot for an animated show for kids. It doesn't make your job easier. I mean, I guess it does a little bit. Writing the pilot's difficult, but you do have to really come up with a fantastic concept and a incredibly well done, professionally designed pitch book. Just for the fun of it, I'll scroll through the pitch book that I'm doing for my project, just so you can see it. It helps to see examples here, and I will share this. We're probably going to go a little long, everybody, just because I've got questions in the Q&A box here. I'll share my screen. You can see this. I'm not going to read it. I just want you guys to get a sense. This is an animated show for kids 11 to 14. The pilot is technically written, but it doesn't need to be. I wrote it because I just wanted to get a sense of the show. But nonetheless, this is 19 pages long. And with an animated show, you're going to be getting into much more of a tonal process. Like I chose for the main character to be speaking in like the first person and kind of telling the story. But you can see we spent a lot of time on making it look good, right? It needs to, this is an animated show, so it has to look like it's going to feel on TV. And then it breaks down the concept, a decent chunk of words on here, but it's not too crazy. And then I get into the character descriptions, and there are a decent chunk of characters. And then I get a little bit of a background on me as the writer. And then I get into the world, because this is it's a big fantasy world that we're presenting, and more details about concept. And then once we get into the episodes, you're spending a little bit more time on describing the episodes, because obviously there isn't a script to read. The first, the pilot episode's a little bit longer of a description. And then you get into episode 2, 3, 4, and then I summarize the remaining. This is all just to get a showrunner or a producer or a network interested in the project. Some people may not read the whole thing, and hopefully they do, because I spent a lot of time on this. But I'll stop sharing. But the point for a pitch Bible, and this goes for hour-long TV also, is to get someone interested in the project. It's not necessarily to make sure they know all of it. And I know that sounds kind of hypocritical, but you don't need to get every single detail in your pitch Bible. I've seen some that are like 25, 30 pages long, and they're detailing, 20 different characters and long descriptions of upcoming episodes. No one's going to read it. I hate to break it to you, but the irony in Hollywood is that nobody wants to read, which is horrible, because that's everything starts with the script. But nonetheless, I just wanted to give you a little example. For animation TV for kids, you don't have to write the script. For hour long or half hour, you can, obviously you need to write the pilot, and but then you don't need to write all the future episodes. They won't really be read unless you're working one-on-one with that showrunner, and that showrunner brings you in, but so many things need to happen once you get to that point. Let me see here. So what comments? Now, these beautiful images, thank you, Catherine, for saying that. How can you afford those? Most of those were found online. There was a website I used, and of course I can't remember it now, but artists put up licensed images, and I think I spent like maybe $300 to download a whole bunch of them. It's very possible to keep it inexpensive. And then a lot of questions here, everybody. So let me look in the Q&A portion, just so I'm making sure we're covering it all. Okay, so let's see. We've got, with more and more shows going straight to series, is it more necessary to have a show Bible and more materials for an entire season in addition to the pilot script? So I kind of answered that. Yes, it is even more necessary. And one of the reasons shows are going straight to series, and I'll explain what that means for anybody who doesn't know what that means. For decades, TV worked in a way where a network would green light the pilot. They would put up money just to produce the pilot. That pilot then would get made with, you know, showrunner, producers, everybody attached, writing team, cast. They would make that. They would test it with audiences, and they'd get people in movie theaters, and I've done this. It's kind of fun. And then those people in audience have comment cards, and they test the heck out of the show. If it tests well, then the network may decide, okay, we'll give it, you know, a 10 episode order. Friends, I think, tested so well, they gave it like a 20 episode order, and it was like overnight the cast was just like, lives changed. This is how they've been doing it for a very, very long time. Because of the pandemic, because of the competition, not even just because of the pandemic, but the competition with streamers, there is so much more content being made, and so there's a little bit more of a gamble being taken on shows, and so that's why now full series orders are being done. Now, it's hard to say if a full series order is 5 seasons. It's usually 1 season, and then we'll see how it goes. Every streamer and network is different, but that's the difference, and that's what they're, you know, with more and more shows going straight to series. That's what this person is referencing. But yeah, it's even that much more necessary to get a really solid show Bible, and we'll call it a pitch Bible, because you don't need, you know, an intense 25, 30, 40, 50 page Bible. Jonathan, where do you get started when writing a new pilot or a rewrite? Well, hopefully I answered some of those questions. But concept character, you know, start with concept character. Don't worry about structure. Don't worry about writing the script. Just do the brainstorming for the concept and character. Can you discuss differences between developing streamers versus network shows, and differences for a limited series or anthology versus a standard ongoing series? Big question, Ryan. Probably won't have enough time to go through all of that. But in terms of some easy differences to talk about, page count is one thing. You know, for a network, you have to account for commercials. So the act breaks in commercials or in network shows are usually representing the commercial breaks. Hour-long TV for HBO or some of the streamers, Netflix, et cetera, they still account for a cut to a black screen at act breaks, which could arguably be a commercial break, but obviously there aren't commercials on Netflix shows, HBO. So there's that. And then going back to page count, a network show is going to be usually a little bit shorter. Things have changed so much, but network show, you're going to probably see 57 to maybe 61 pages. For streamers, you can probably get away with 60 to 65. Again, it's so relative. If you have a dialogue heavy show, and it's, you know, a half hour, the script might be 38 pages, you know, but try to keep it relatively low, around 38 or less. For a sitcom on a network, you're looking at 30 pages or less. So there are finite, you know, so-called quote unquote rules there. So page count's a little different. In terms of limited series, obviously what a limited series is it has a beginning, middle, and end. You know, once you're done with that season, you're done with the series. So it's really like developing a long form movie. You're going to be looking at really developing the feature length story of this and then breaking it up into episodes. Anthologies are difficult, but, you know, you're going to have an overall conceptual theme. And, you know, the length of the episodes are going to be pretty much the same. You know, it's going to be an hour long, probably. Anyway, there are a lot of different relative ways to answer that question, but I hope that helps a little bit, Ryan. I just want to get through all the questions. But Derek, let's see. I have a novel series, a trilogy that I'm interested in creating, a limited series or a full series with multiple seasons. From a conceptual basis, how do you determine if you have a limited series, a full series, or just 3 individual movies? Really good question, Derek. And really it's up to you. You know, I mean, how long do you want the audience to spend with your characters? And are the characters layered enough to be able to go off on personal storylines to then help create episodes? You know, with a movie, you've got a finite amount of time. You got maybe 2 hours. And you're not going to be able to spend that much time on the B character, the C character, or the B story, the C story. You're going to have, you know, 5, 6 scenes with each of those. With TV, you could have 5 or 6 episodes just focused on these other characters. Look what Lost did. You know, after a while, Lost had complete episodes focusing on like the 5th character down the cast sheet, So if you have a fully formed story with a lot of characters in a pretty big idea, then you're going to probably go the TV route because you can spend more time with these characters. I hope that helps. Derek, we can talk about that in one-on-one. Derek's one of my story farm writers. Mike, I wrote an original TV sitcom proposal with a complete series Bible, pilot episode, a second episode script, and wait. In 2012, I presented it to a number of people. Let's see, they all gave it good reviews, but also the same thing, that I am no one in the business and therefore have no chance of the project ever going anywhere. Well, don't listen to that portion of the feedback, Mike. That's a horrible thing for anybody to say to a writer. They told me to write Walking Dead specs. I had no interest in that. In 2015, a friend told me to get 2 to 3 representative scenes from the 2 scripts on video. I tried to do this, cast actors. The funding fell through. Where can I go with this project since I'm still no one in the business? Well, first of all, be angry at the person who told you that you're no one and you have no chance. That's not cool. The project is what either has a chance or doesn't. So you cannot take that personally. One thing to consider, Mike, and this is going to be kind of the tough love type of comment. If you've been working on the project since 2008 and it still hasn't gone somewhere, you might want to put it to the side, at least focus on other projects. Because if you have another project that makes headway, it wins a contest or 2, or it gets great feedback and maybe somebody suggests it to somebody, then the other project that you haven't been able to set up could come back. There's no really true shelf life to a screenplay or a story, because every story has its own time, and we don't have control over when our career will take off or when a story is going to have an effect. So that would be my first, tough love comment. Like, if the project hasn't been picked up yet, if people haven't expressed enough interest yet, put it to the side and wait, But in terms of, where can I go with the project since I'm still no one in the business? I mean, it's a tough question to answer. And the reason I'm spending a little more time on this question is because this can go for everybody. We need to be writing as many scripts as we possibly can, period. Not just spending all of our time on one project. And, hopefully, Mike, you're not getting angry with me for saying that. I mean this, with the best intentions. But the more scripts you write, the more opportunities and options you have for other people to find you. Also, you're going to improve your craft. You're going to become a better writer with each script you work on. And then maybe you go back to this project and you look at it and go, oh, I could make some of these changes, or I could maybe improve it here. I applaud you for going all out and putting all of your effort into that project, and maybe it'll become something someday. But the hard answer to give here, and I'm doing this not just to you, Mike, but for everybody watching, sometimes a project just doesn't go anywhere. And I hate giving that answer because that sucks. It really sucks. Sometimes we just love a project so much and you don't want to let go of it. I get it. I've been working on that Bible, story, the Bible story, The Wish Keeper, that I'm turning into a TV animated series. Since like 2007 or so. It was a feature. Then I wrote it as a novel. I'm working on the second book. I turned it into a podcast. I've then, tried to develop it as a TV series. And we'll see, if it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't go anywhere. And eventually I'm just going to have to put it to the side. But maybe there are other mediums you could use for that project. Maybe it's a narrative podcast. Maybe it's a novel. Maybe it's a comic book. If you love the project enough, just keep fighting. It's difficult when you are still technically a no-name, but no-names find work all the time and they still remain a no-name. Anyway, hopefully that helps. Sorry, Mike, it's a tough answer to give. David, I really like your classes. I'm taking off work right now to see it. I'm concerned. Well, hopefully you're not going to get fired. Recently, Amazon banned the relatively benign Dr. Seuss. Other cartoon characters have recently been canceled. As a writer, what good is it to create a funny or provocative script if cultural Marxists or censors in China deem it objectionable and cancel it? Tough luck. Sorry, David. Tough luck to those people. There, you have every reason to write what you are inspired by. If people don't take it or buy into it, or they're not inspired by it like you are, you don't have any control over that. You know, not every single character, not every single story is going to be canceled. Dr. Seuss can still be read. People can still pick up the book and read it. You know, so I wouldn't worry about outside influence. You have to write the story that you love and that you are inspired by, and tell your story. You know, you put your voice out there. Other people will connect to it. These are outside influences and forces that you really have no control over. So that would be my best way to answer that question. Let's see here. I have a concept for a series. I was told by my current teacher it was great. Selling a concept, do they purchase or option the idea or concept and find a showrunner? Big question. All of the above and none of the above, you know. So if you have, oh boy. So for what we're trying to do with the Wish Keeper, that Bible I showed you, we're trying to get a showrunner interested and attached to it, so that that showrunner can take it to a network or a studio or a streamer. With that person being attached to the project, it will be worth more. There's a little bit more of a package, and the network knows they can work with that showrunner. They like that showrunner. The showrunner has, you know, produced other things in the past. They trust that person, and suddenly they'll put up money to develop the show, to hire writers, to get a team together, eventually produce the show. That's usually how any TV show goes. Now, it's a really general, broad answer, but you are going to get paid when someone has the money to fund the project. I mean, that's the hard truth. It's rare that an independent producer is just going to give you a chunk of money and take your project and run with it. It just doesn't really work that way anymore. Net studios don't really very often just outright purchase a screenplay. Here's $1 million, and you know, they just don't. That doesn't happen anymore, especially for writers who have yet to prove themselves. Scripts can be purchased if and when there are other levels of talent attached, if there's a major director attached to it, because it's the package that's being purchased. And it's not just a purchase, it's an investment, right? There's a studio or some form of funding machine that is investing money into this project with the hopes that it makes not only the money back, but more. So your project is a business that someone finds lucrative, puts money into it. And then in terms of your pay, it's all relative to what you work out with the studio, what your attorney may be able to help you with, WGA standards. You know, it's a lot of different levels of answers to that. But hopefully that helped. Peter, with more shows going on streaming services, the popularity of serialized over episodic, do you see the structure of individual episodes changing? It seems that many of these shows are almost 10-part movies. Yeah, it's becoming more and more that way. But I don't think you're ever going to get rid of the procedurals. You're never going to lose the sitcoms. People love those things because it's a different experience sitting down and watching. You know, when people sit down to watch a sitcom, they don't want to think. You know, they just want to have some laughs, and it's 20 minutes. You know, you're never going to lose that. Long form TV, hour-long stuff. You know, there are so many different levels to it. There's general serialized, which is, you know, trying to find an example, you know, like a traditional type of serialized show like a Breaking Bad. There's the higher concept stuff, which is hour-long, like Stranger Things. It really is all dependent on the story, but you know, it's allowing people to sit at home and have something to do every night, as opposed to, here's my one time to go out to a theater, drop 30-40 bucks, watch one story in 2 hours. People still want to do that, but it's a much different experience. So yeah, you're right. I mean, more TV shows are turning into long form movies. Let's see. Can you say which screenwriting software you use, have used, or recommend? It's a great question, even though the anonymous person said fun question. We all need to be using screenwriting software. Do not rely on Word templates. I know for some of you, it may be difficult to hear that. Don't rely on those Word templates. They just don't look right. No matter how hard you try to make it look, it just doesn't work. I notice, and everybody in the ISA notice immediately, much less everybody in town. So Final Draft, Movie Magic Screenwriter, Writer Duet. is pretty cheap. I think it's like $20, $25 a month, and it's all online. They have their own little cloud, and you save your stuff to that, and you can print to PDFs. There are a couple others that are pretty solid, but those are the three primary that I know of that I have used. Industry standard, they look right. Sometimes Celtics just doesn't really line up. I notice that there are little formatting things that just don't fit. So if you're going to do this for the long term, I know Final Draft is expensive. You got to invest in yourselves in some way. I get it. If you're a little strapped for money, we're all dealing with that over the past year. But if Writer Duet is a good option. $20-25 a month. Allie, do you have any recent TV viewing recommendations that demonstrate a cleverly or horribly crafted story? Why do some flounder over the seasons, and what can we learn from this? So my recent favorite show, literally from like the past 10 years, I enjoyed it so much, is Ted Lasso on Apple TV Plus. Just love that show. It's so simple. And if you know, and this is something that you all can do, kind of in reference to what I was saying in terms of some of us being financially strapped, the easiest and the most free education is to obviously watch TV, but you can't be a passive watcher, viewer. Study the show, pay attention to the beats, pay attention to how each episode is structured. If you watch Ted Lasso, as fun and relatively different as this show is, because it's we're in the streaming world today, and you wouldn't see that show on a NBC or something, but it's all kind of structured the same way. You see Ted go in every morning and give his little treats to the owner of the football team. And they have a fun little conversation that usually ends up being the teaser for every episode. And then they get into the episode situation that involves one particular character. But then you have the overarching issue, situation, problem, whatever, of the plot. We have a very American football coach taking a job to coach a Premier League European football team in London. That in and of itself is your overall situation. On top of that, the character is extremely optimistic to the point of being annoying. And in British culture, if you will, they have a very level sense of belief, I guess could be the way. Like there's a theme that it runs through the show where it's stated, it's the hope that will kill you, which is kind of a funny little joke, but it comes out that, it's a little bit of a way of thinking for some British people, not everybody, but it's a much different thought process compared to Ted, who is the coach, who is constantly optimistic, seeing the bright side of things. So you have that plot level situation going every single episode. Then you get into the characters, and the characters are so wonderful, and you have so much empathy for them. You understand why they're making the decisions they're making, whether they're good decisions or bad decisions, why they're jerks, why they're not. And it's just a really fun situation to tune into every episode. So I highly recommend watching Ted Lasso. But going back to that idea of it's free to watch TV. So pay attention to how shows are structured. Beat it out. How many minutes in does this big moment have? Define the goal for the main character. What does that character do, and how does that character pursue that goal? It's the same exact thing for every single TV series, just cut up in different ways with different concepts and different situations, different characters, personal issues. That's why TV is becoming so big, because there's almost an infinite amount of stories to tell. Let's do two more questions, everybody. I'm so sorry that we have a ton of questions here. I'm going about 15 minutes longer. We'll go about 25 minutes past. So let me see here. Find one that kind of hits something overall. Ryan is asking, should limited series be thought of as long features in terms of the focus on character arc versus situational evolution? Really good question. The general answer is yeah. You could look at a limited series as a long form movie broken up into hour-long episodes. So if you know the process of developing a feature, if you have 12 sequences in a feature-length story, broken up into 3 acts. So you have 3 sequences. Each sequence makes up roughly 10 pages, a little less. Yeah. You've got 3 sequences in the first act, 6 sequences in the second act, 3 sequences in the third act. This is for a feature. You technically have the same structural makeup in a TV episode. They're just condensed a lot more. You still have the same sequential order of things. And this is one thing I'm not getting into in this webinar in terms of the details there. It's structural details as a whole other class. But for a feature, if you break that up into 12 sequences, you'll have 110 pages, maybe a little less, maybe a couple more. But you also look at, okay, I've got 12 sequences. If there are 10 episodes in a season, I can then assign episode 1 to be like my first sequence of my movie. Episode 2 is like the second sequence. Episode 3 is the, and so on and so forth. It's a little bit more formulaic that way, and it helps you stay organized from just a structural brainstorming approach. So yes, Ryan. In terms of character arc, I mean, yeah, you're gonna. It's so dependent on material. Some limited series, the whole point of seeing the show go, from episode 1 to episode 10 is to see this type of character go through this type of situation, and then the back and forth of the two makes it for a really fun adventure or whatever. And then your character doesn't technically change by the end. There's no rule to say your character has to be completely different by the end of the episode. I think the only rule is that you have to be incredibly engaging and interesting and different and unique. Like My Hero Academia, there are the entire class 1. Oh, this is a really specific question, Pinky, I'm sorry. When looking at a pitch Bible, you want to get into character descriptions of, here's the character flaw, here's what they want personally, their desire. Why can't they have it? What's holding them back? You want to present character descriptions and work through character sketches so that you can start to see moments that will occur on screen, really no matter what situation you put that character in. So if a character is a particular type with this type of personality and beliefs, etc., then you can put that character into any situation, obviously in preference to the situation that you're developing for the show. But that's where you want to be. You want to get to this level of character sketching so that you can start seeing moments on screen. What might be some scenes? What might be some moments? What are some windows into who this character is, like the type of bedside clock, the posters on the wall? Those things don't necessarily need to be in your pitch Bible, but anyway. So Annalyn is asking an interesting question. What about a bilingual series? It's great. Absolutely. I mean, America is bilingual and really trilingual, quadrilingual, so if you have a great story idea and you have multiple languages, I mean, this may be a terrible example, but if you look at shows like a Game of Thrones or oh gosh, I can't think of any off the top of my head. There are other languages that are presented there. But for sure, I mean, I think you're going to be speaking to more audiences that way if you have, multiple languages referenced. Sarah is asking, with COVID, what's the best way to network, get your pilot and projects out there? Kanisha is asking, how do I get my TV series pitched by, heard by a network? They're big questions, guys. And or I shouldn't say guys, everyone. But they're really, I don't know if there's a best way. I mean, this is a lazy answer, write an amazing script and people will find it, but I know that doesn't really help you. There are organizations like the ISA where you can post your script to your profile. Producers are looking for things there. Roadmap Writers is pretty solid. You can purchase time with junior executives and pitch people your projects there. Contests are great. Everybody should be submitting to contests, even just to gauge how the material is doing. If you win a decent, sized contest, other than the nickel, you're going to do well. People will find you. And there are, there was one other reference I was going to, fellowships. Just about every studio has some level of a fellowship. Nickelodeon has one. Universal Writers, I think, is feature only, but then CBS used to have a diversity initiative. But there are a lot of studio fellowships that are free to enter. They're extremely cutthroat. Competition is extremely high. But if you're accepted into the fellowship, they'll pay you. I think it's like 30 grand a year or something to be a part of their kind of initiative. And, there are ways to get yourself noticed, but we've got to come from a place of let's develop the hell out of this project and get people reading it, get notes on it, give it to 3 or more people so that you can start seeing patterns in what's wrong. You know, the various notes come in, 4 different people are saying the same note. I have to address that. This takes a long time. There's no easy road here. You know, there's no one right way to get in there. And in there, I mean, to make a career out of this career. My brain's already starting to go, but this isn't easy. It's not supposed to be easy. And we need to be taking the time to, like you all are here, you know, to educate ourselves, to grow and learn. We have to be writing. If you're not writing, you're not a writer. You know, I mean, it's pretty simple. So we have to be working at it. We have to be crafting these projects. Thank you, everybody, for saying such kind things in the comments. But you're doing what you are supposed to be doing here. The hardest part of this, and I speak for myself here, is curbing that impatience. You know, there's no timeline, and we're not in control of the timeline of our careers. All we're in control of is how much work we put out there, and how much time we spend on our education. So utilize as many of the resources as you can. ISA is just one of them, and we're going to do everything we can to help you all. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We had a great turnout.